Hello everyone and welcome to the last real life racing episode for a while. And with that in mind, I wanted to have a little bit of fun in this one and see how far up the field I could get after starting in last. Here we go then. Let's have a bit of fun. This video is brought to you by a lack of ads. I don't have mid-roll ads on any of my videos because I want you to have an uninterrupted viewing experience. If you appreciate that, consider giving the video a like or leave a comment in order to help it with the almighty algorithm. So as the race starts, you'll notice that it is very wet, which is, classic British summer. And I'm in 20th place out of 20, so it's all going to be just about survival in this one. Last time there was a wet race, which was in the last episode, I didn't really do that great. I spun around a little bit too much and had too many issues, honestly. So for this one, all I wanted to do was just survive and keep it on the track, keep it going forward, no major mistakes, and see where I ended up by the end. It was a fairly, I would say, I took it easy on this first lap. I just, again, didn't want to get involved in anything, but also I didn't want to force the issue too much. I just wanted to settle in slowly. I had the whole race to be able to, make up places, and I figured I'd just let people make mistakes in front of me, which didn't actually happen. It was the cleanest start in a wet race I've ever seen around this track, and obviously that was unlucky for me because it meant I was still in last place, but I got 3 positions very early. It didn't take long, let's put it that way, before people did start spinning out and making mistakes. So why did I decide to start at the back in this one? Well, I talked about it in the previous episode. I'm not going to be doing any more races in this championship this season, or probably next season as well, because I simply can't afford it right now. I'd already paid for 3 of the rounds, and those are the 3 that I've done. I paid for that before Baby 1322 arrived, but I've been able to use those 3 rounds throughout the course of the year instead of having to, give them up or whatever, because I couldn't make it when Baby 1322 was here in the early days. And I simply, beyond that, can't afford the £65 a month to do this anymore. That just isn't there in my budget at the moment. So, yeah, I won't be doing any more rounds of this for the foreseeable future. There won't be any more real life racing episodes for the foreseeable future, unfortunately, as well. But, since coming back to this championship in 2023 after having a long hiatus since the 2014 and 2015 series, I've basically achieved everything that I wanted. I got my first place trophy in the lightweight category that eluded me in such a cruel manner multiple times back in 2014 and 2015. I dominated a race at the end of last year to get another first place trophy in the heavyweight category. And in the last 2 episodes, I've proven to myself that I can still be competitive at the front and drive on top pace around here with the new fleet of karts that should all be equal, or at least as equal as they're ever going to be. Short of winning a championship, since I finished 2nd and 3rd in the championship back in 2014 and 2015 respectively, I've achieved everything that I could want here. But, winning a championship requires a level of commitment that I just can't see myself giving right now, alongside a bit of good luck. So with that in mind, I decided that since these were going to be my last races and nothing was really on the line for me in terms of championship points, it's not as if I've done all the rounds here anywhere or I'm in a championship fight, I'd purposefully start in last place and have a bit of fun battling to see how far up the order I could get. Since you start race 2 in the position you finished race 1, I'd effectively have a 30-minute race with a mid-race safety car to see what I could do, essentially. That's kind of what that sort of reset is between race 1 and race 2. For the content, if you like. Now, my aim going into this was that I'd be able to finish in the top half, but that was what I could hope for. I'm already up into 12th place, so a good start. I've kind of just been, taking advantage of other people getting involved in incidents or spinning out or making mistakes. Basically doing some of the things that I was doing in the last episode, and thankfully haven't been doing so far, just keeping it clean. And, one of the mottos for this channel is top 5 is always possible, so that was more of a stretch goal, I guess you could say. But this isn't just like starting at the back of some race with a bunch of randoms like I did in an old episode back from 2014. I'll link that down below if you want to see it. There's a lot of good drivers here who know what they're doing, so top 10, the top half was my aim, and then I could sort of build on that for race 2, because then I would start in whatever position I finish, and I'm further up the order to see where I can get in race 2. But with people, continually spinning off, I'm just making places all the time. I'm already up into that top half, and there's still quite a few people in front of me. At this point, it sort of became clear, I think, that I had good pace. I was relatively quick. What I did with qualifying is I just came into the pits every other lap. So my best qualifying lap is like, I don't know, 4 minutes long or something like that. So I didn't really know. I didn't have a gauge of how quick I was, but I was feeling pretty good in terms of pace. And as we see another mistake there from the guy in front in the last corner, there I am up into 9th. And at this point there's a pretty decently sized gap further ahead, so it's all about just trying to close that gap and see if I can get any more places before the race ends. The group in the front was sort of starting to pull away at this point, and that's kind of what I expected. Usually, obviously, the quickest people are going to be starting at the front because they were the quickest in qualifying, and as the race goes on, that group generally drive away from everybody, and me standing at the back, I felt like, okay, I'm never going to be winning this race or anything, but I can at least see how far up the order I can get. And I think this race and these races serve to highlight something that, it's just, it's not as fun as it used to be with the format that they choose for these races. Back in 2014 and 2015, we used to do 3 shorter races after a qualifying session, and then a longer final. The positions for that final on the grid were based on how well you did in the first 3 heats. So more of a traditional round of karting, if you like. Now, obviously, we have a 15-minute qualifying session, a 15-minute race, and then another 15-minute race. So it's kind of like, I guess, in total 45 minutes of driving a kart, 15 minutes of which is kind of not really relevant because it's just qualifying. And then it's just like having one 30-minute race with a mid-race safety car to bring everyone back together. Even if I couldn't, obviously the fact that I can't afford it is the main reason I'm not doing this, but even if I could, it's kind of like, it's just the same sort of thing over and over again, and it's not particularly interesting really, I think, anymore. And I think it's certainly not as interesting as it used to be, and there's plenty of ways I feel like it could be made more fun. I think some of the best racing comes from having a bit of an offset, but making it a fair offset. So, we've got that say the track wants to limit it to 45 minutes of racing for your £65. That's the maximum you're going to get. Obviously, they've chosen to do 15 minutes qualifying, 15-minute race 1, 15-minute race 2. But I feel like that's the most boring way you could use those 45 minutes. You could do a 5-minute qualifying session, 3 8-minute races with the top 10 reversed for races 2 and 3 every time, and then a 15-minute final where the grid is set by the points accrued during the first 3 races like it used to be. Or you could do 2 or 3 races where everyone gets the same average grid spot and there's no qualifying. So if you started first in one race, you would start last in another race, for example, and middle in another if there's 3. There's almost certainly some algorithm or tool online to easily work that out on the fly, I'm sure. And then again, a longer final race with a grid set by the performance in the first few races. Because at the moment it feels like sort of, the second race is deemed to be the final, but it's just a rerun of the first race really. So you get the trophy for the final, but it's no different in terms of a format to what the first race was. When you have multiple shorter races first, you have to do well in those shorter races to get a good grid spot for the final, and then you've got to perform in the final, and it's all gearing up to that final longer race. This format at the moment it's just kind of not particularly interesting. It's probably easier for the track to run, in terms of the mechanics of getting the carts out there and gridding people up and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't think it's as fun as what it used to be. So there's nothing sort of also driving me to do this every time. By the way, I gained a position as we crossed over to the this lap at the start of the lap because somebody got black flagged. So that's why I'm in 8th now. And as you saw, I've really closed up on the guy in front. Actually, someone I've known for a long time. Who I used to race with at times back in the 2014 and 2015 series too. And there's two key areas where I'm quicker, and it's sort of this last part of the lap and the very first part of the lap. But you'll see over the course of the next few laps how difficult it is to overtake in the wet, because you want to be staying offline, essentially off what is the normal racing line, because that's where all the rubber gets laid down. So when it rains, it's more slippy, so you can see me going around the outside of the track. I take a much more outside line here, which gives me a much better sort of outside line here to get more speed going into this section. But I've never quite got the overspeed, and this one I actually hit him and I decided to let him go back through because I didn't feel like it was a fair move. I still gained a position though because somebody's gone off in front, so there's 7th place, and now we're battling for 6th with the top 5 in their own group further ahead. So really this is about as far as I'm going to get. This battle over 6th place is the best I'm going to get, but from being last on the grid, that's pretty good. But it's going to be an interesting final few laps of trying to find a way past, because say you want to go up the inside, then you're suddenly then on the what you would call the normal racing line, where all the slippy rubber has been laid down, and you don't have the grip to be able to get up the inside and make the move. So I probably could have been more forceful, and even after the race, the overtake that I just made where I gave him the position back, he did say to me afterwards that it was sort of his mistake to not be quicker there, and I could have just taken the position, but I didn't feel like it was fair enough. I did hit him. I took a bit too much speed in, and as you can see there's a perfect example of it. I tried to go up the inside because I have a better line around the final part of the track here, and I'm quicker. I tried to go up the inside and use that overspeed, but then you're on the slippy stuff and there's nowhere for you to go, and I don't want to just run into him and knock him off the track. So it's interesting. It was an interesting battle for these final few laps, trying to find a way past. And there's, like I said, there's 2 specific places where I'm quicker, which is here and around the sort of final few corners. But it was just difficult to get an opening really that was going to be clean and make that move. But yeah, coming back to the conversation of the format, I think it would be so much more fun if we had more shorter races, I think, and honestly less qualifying. If you're going to do 45 minutes, just don't do qualifying. Either a 5-minute quick qualifying session just to give people a general sort of a position of where they approximately should be. But really, like I said, I think the best races are where things are offset, like the random select races that we do on 5M, where everybody gets the same car by the end of the race, but you get it in a different order. So you might get all the slow cars first, and then you go quicker at the end with all the fast cars, but ultimately by the end of the race everybody's had the same situation. I think that's what provides some of the most fun and interesting racing, and you could do that here by averaging out the grid spots for everybody every week. So sometimes and it's also a bit more of a test of skill, I think, of sometimes you're going to start at the back and you have to work your way through the pack cleanly. Sometimes you'll start at the front and have to drive away from people. It's a test of different aspects of racing, rather than just here's a 15-minute qualifying session which uses up a quarter of your karting time for just one lap really, and then 2 15-minute races where the second race is basically just an extension of the first one. So we're on the final lap here, and I do get a really good overspeed here, but again I just can't take the risk of going up the inside. Again, it's more slippery on the inside. Just could not make that happen. So I've only really got one more chance, and I'm going to have to wait until we get to the final part of the lap. During the middle part of the lap, it was generally it was fine. It was you know, that was a back marker, by the way. That position, that I didn't gain a position there from someone spinning off. It already had a bad time, I think. But yeah, it was just a case of we were pretty evenly matched around the middle of the lap. I was a little bit quicker, I think, and I think I could have had a much better lap time overall if I hadn't been sort of behind for most of a lap, and I think my lap time could have been on the pace of the leaders, the way that it worked out, and the sort of extra speed that I had here, but it just couldn't find a way past. So this is the last bit where I'm quicker, around this sort of long left-hander, going wide and then getting the overspeed. He goes a little bit wide there, and I'm side by side around the final corner, but because again he's on the outside, he has the grip to be able to go through. I get a better exit out of the final corner, which I've been managing to do. I've been practicing it. We're going to the line, and it's just not enough by a fraction. I couldn't manage to get that position. So it was a fun battle and fun trying to work out where I could go at the end. And yes, so close. I think I had the pace to be sort of fighting with the leaders, really. But yeah, you know, starting at the back, I was never going to catch them. But we had a bit of fun on the way there, and now I was going to be starting in 7th place for the second race, so I'd be able to see if I could go even further forward in the second race, and maybe I can get a podium or something and a trophy in my final race. So here we go then, the last race ever at this track. I say ever, you know, I might come back at some point, but certainly not in the near future. And I didn't get the greatest start. Obviously it was still wet, but it wasn't the best start, and but I'd sort of learned from previous bad starts in the wet that I wanted to just stick on the inside and not get taken out. But obviously that was way too much to ask, because I just, you know, people spun out in front of me, I hit them, I got hit from behind, and I ended up at the back anyway. So just like last time, I've been at the back once again. I gain a position straight away from someone else spinning out further up ahead, and then I gain another position just down the corner down here by someone else spinning out, and then my kart just dies. I've got my foot hard to the floor, and it just gradually slows down and then cuts out completely. So you know, it's typical, isn't it? I brought it into the pit lane and swapped it out for a different kart, and then you get put back into the race approximately where you should have been, which for me, I should have been at the back really, because I'd already had the crash, but I don't know whether they thought that it was my kart had sort of been bad and put me down there in the first place. They put me back out in 10th, right in the middle, which I don't know, it wasn't correct, but I just drove anyway, and that was kind of it for the race really. Not an awful lot happened. By this time it was lap 3, there was already big gaps. I can't believe the previous race was so clean at the start, because every single wet race I've done here since I've been coming back to the championship, there's always been something going on at the start. It's just, you know, that doesn't help either when you get better racing in sim racing instead of real life racing. I made one little mistake there to drop down a position, unfortunately, but then I made a position late on in the race as somebody else made a mistake in the first few corners. So ultimately I ended up finishing in 10th. You know, I went from 10th to 10th with one position lost, one position gained, and that was kind of it for the race. It wasn't very interesting, which is unfortunate really. You know, it would have been nice to build on that 7th place from the first race and maybe fight at the front. My lap times by the end of the race suggested I could have done that. You know, I had good enough best lap times to be able to be fighting with the leaders. But yeah, that was it. That was the end, and it was a interesting moment at the end, because, you know, when the realization sets in that this is the final lap, I'll let you watch it as it happened.
And there it is. It's over. Bit of a unfortunate way to end, I guess. But it's been fun. Maybe I'll come back at some point, but not regularly. It's really weird that this is my last lap. And there it is.
Thank you all very much for watching the Real Life Racing series. I hope it gets to come back at some point in the future, and I'll see you next time.